た女王と違うな。
王冠かぶったのが2ヶ月前か。
Okay, time skip, 2 months.
院長の方が板についてきてる。
これって
地下街から壁の端まで孤児や困窮者を
Oh, from the underground, nice.
これには地下街出身の兵長の後押しもあったらしい。困っている人がいたらどこにいたって見つけたし助けに行くって言ってた。
ライナーとベルトルトともう一度会うことになるとしたら
It's only
奴らは殺さなきゃならない。
そんなこと
あの時は人類なんか滅べばいいとか言ってたのにな。
あれは勢い余ってるから
oh. Jeez, Mikasa, take it easy.
なんだよ。
貸して。
おい。
エレンは実験で疲れてる。そうだね、ごめんミカサ。
地下空間で発見された光る鉱石など得たものも多かった。そしてエレンの硬質化の能力は
Was it Sunnis?
いいぞ、もっと首を突っ込め。
おお、うなじに当たったぞ。
Oh.
今度こそは。いいぞ。これなら兵士が戦わなくても。
That's crazy. I mean, it's gonna take a lot of time, but
巨人伐採しまくりの地獄の証言人の誕生だ。やっとな、エレン。
oh. Oh, is he using it too much?
おそらく巨人の力を酷使しすぎたんだろう。
Shit.
俺が疲れたくらいなんだって言うんですか。早く武器を揃えていきましょう。志願しなくに。
おいおい、お前らすっかり歴戦の猛者か。お前らと比べられてしまえばな。
He's seen some action, bro.
同じ104期だろ。でも確かにお前ら変わったよな。面構えっていうか、一体何があったんだ。
They've seen some shit.
聞きたいか。いや、また今度にするよ。
コニーのお母さんを元に戻す方法決してないわけじゃないんですよね。
これから巨人の解明が進んでいけばいつかは。
Right now, there you need a shifter. That's not easy.
人間。
60年ぐらいだ。もうずっと終わらない悪夢を見ているようだったよ。
悪夢か。いろいろあってうやむやになってたけど、俺たちが戦ってる敵は何なんだろうな。悪夢にうなされ続ける人間ってことなのか。
Pretty much, dude. You kind of nailed it.
そんな巨人に。
エレン
たくよ、エレン、お前最近そればっかだぞ。ブツブツと。お前が思い出さなきゃいけねえのはあの男だろ。見たんだろ。洞窟で記憶を掘り返された時、親父さんと会っていた調査兵団の男ってやつを。
Keith?
行間の頭突きでも食らえばいいんだよ。
それで思い出せんなら。あれ。訓練兵団教官。キース・シャーディス。
どうしたブラウス、座らんのか。
私はこちらで結構です。
あれからたった数ヶ月、みんな見違えるように。
Yeah, they've grown a lot, man, in those few months. Damn.
エレン、お前は母親とよく似ているな。だが、その瞳の奥に宿る父親そのものだ。
Dude, for a split second, I thought he's like his real dad or something.
志願しなく壁門の目前に彼はいた。
おい、あんた、ここで何をしている。どうやって壁を越えて
Holy
き
sh!
あなたたちこそ壁の外で何を。まさか戦っているのか。
本当か嘘か。彼はなぜ壁の外にいるのか覚えていなかった。
Shit.
記憶を一切なくして
He was the first?
グリシャ・イエーガーという 名前以外
He ke-
無許可で巨人領域に足を踏
Damn, I don't know why that made me tear up.
名前以外にも覚えていることがある。私は医者だ。
Ah, okay, so he remembers some things.
できる仕事があるはずだ。そして私に教えてくれ。
Dude, he's the original sleeper agent. He came over
調査兵だ。
or he ran. Two possibilities.
あなたたちのことを
He's got a lot of questions.
少なくとも巨人に怯えて生きているわけではない。
Oh,
よかった。
is that?
人類の誇りそのものだ。
誇り我々が
ああ。
ちょっとキースさん、また調査兵団の勧誘かい？
違うぞ
Carla.
いや、私なんぞに務まるものではないでしょう。
グリシャ、彼らも例の伝染病だ。なんとかならないか。
Ah,
奥のベッドに。
this is the plague Hannes is talking about in episode 1.
イエガー先生、イエガー先生、ありがとうございます。
調査兵団団長に任命する。
おめでとうイエガー先生。
Jeez, man. Man, I can't stop thinking about Grisha and the possibilities right now.
また自分だけ生き延びたのかい。
キースさん、
Oh, baby Eren.
なぜ凡人は何もせず死ぬまで生きていられるかわかるか。まず想像力に乏しいからだ。手当たり次第男の愛想を振りまき、酒をついで回るしか取り柄のないものなんぞには決して。
But you can understand his pain though. His
そう。
episode 1.
何も成し遂げなかった特別な人間はいる。ただそれが
Yeah.
自分ではなか
Damn.
ったと
It's a
いうだけ
bystander.
のこと。はあ、思い出した。お前だったな。
It's from Eren's flashback.
エレン、母さんの仇を
Hmm.
撃て。
I've heard that before.
お前にはできる。ついてこないで。
Oh, this is it.
待て。
His glasses.
お前が撃てばいいだろう。彼らの仇を。なんせお前は特別だからな。私と違って選ばれし者じゃないかもしれないぞ。
Eren is not a normal.
また人に呪いをかけるのか。
Oh,
この子はあんたとは違う。
are you gonna curse someone else? That's some deep shit, man.
雷。
Ah, he brought Eren back.
自分が特別じゃないとかどうとか言った。そんな幼稚な理由でここにいる。
よせ、ハンジ。
あんたの劣等感なんかどうでもいい。
Damn.
現実から逃げるな。
教官の言う通り俺は特別でも何でもなかった。ただ特別な父親の息子だった。
Oh,
それだけだったんです。
特別じゃなきゃいけないんですか？私はそうは思いませんよ。少なくともこの子は偉大になんてならなくてもいい。人より優れていなくたってこんなに可愛い。
he is.
だからこの子はもう偉いんです。この世界に生まれてきてくれたんだから。
お前は父親が願ったように自らの命を燃やし壁の外で燃え尽きるのだろう。
Oh my god, it was him.
何一つ変えることはできない。ただの傍観者だ。
Jeez, man. Gotta feel for Shardis. Dude, this feels like the finale, but it's not. Beautiful, beautiful. That was actually quite fantastic. These are the types of episodes that really get me excited. And I'm lucky enough to get 2 of them back to back. This I felt like this was such a great example of a fantastically written flashback. It had its inciting incident, it had progressions, it had a turning point. Great stuff. And I also felt like this was a natural conclusion to the season. Really felt like that. Because, some things came full circle, right? And, kind of like the closing of a chapter. Eren was able to get closure, on the type of person he used to be. One of the reasons for that is because, Keith's introspection was so similar to Eren's in these last few episodes, right? Internal contradictions, turmoil, coming to harsh realizations, of not being some sort of special chosen ones. So Isayama momentarily turned Keith into an impact character, right, for Eren's progression. Speaking of Keith, I think he did something so important for Eren, by telling him of what his mother said to him all that time ago. And I think even Keith himself was able to get some much needed perspective from that, from what Carla said. The interesting thing is that it was actually Carla's husband, Grisha, who kind of, changed Keith's trajectory, right? By telling him that, he's a special person, right? It takes a chosen one to be doing the things he's doing as a scout, right? So by the end of it all, he did end up feeling like Grisha cursed him. And speaking of being cursed, I think Keith was spot on. I think he was spot on about Grisha potentially cursing his son as well. Putting this immense burden on Eren, it completely changed his life, right? It's had a major impact on him. And it is something he struggled under quite a bit, right? It's a burden he struggled with quite a bit. So kind of like, getting cursed with the sins of the father to an extent. From a different angle, there's also a matter of my ticking time bomb plot device theory, right? And the possibility that Eren himself might have to pass this on as well now, right? Potentially. So Keith might not even know it, but he might be right about that on a totally different level as well, right? Much more devastating level, perhaps. If that does end up being the case, if I'm right about it. So it appears that I do owe my dude Jean an apology for initially thinking that he was the one who messed with Eren's equipment. I still remember that episode. Because it turns out it was Keith. He intentionally sabotaged Eren's equipment in an attempt to, save him perhaps from the life of a scout, right? A life which brings, pain, suffering, and constant danger, right? And it appears that this might have been, or, the lovely thing here is that this is probably for Carla, in her memory, right? But despite his attempts, Eren made it happen. He still made it happen. And, Keith reluctantly let him, continue on that path, right? And there's this amazing line of dialogue. Choose to set ablaze your life, which will burn to ashes outside the walls. Oh, damn. It's quite the opposite of the life Carla wanted for Eren, right? So Isayama's at it again, painting a character in a totally different light and establishing empathy. After originally presenting them or introducing them as almost inconsequential to the main plot. I think his writing has a fantastic progressive pattern. He's a master at spacing things out and revealing them bit by bit at just the right moments of the story. So his impressive and intricate planning is on display once again. I'm a big fan of the way he structures his narrative. Finding the right structure for something that intricate, that takes a substantial amount of time, right? And I'm sure he spent a lot of time trying to get that right. And, before he even in pre-production, I mean, I hope that once the story has reached its conclusion, once it's wrapped up, I hope there is some kind of extensive look at his process, right? I would love that. Perhaps some kind of, long interview in an article, or perhaps maybe even a book, later down the line, maybe later in his career, maybe he could write some kind of book. I would love to read it. I know that much. And I'm sure so many of you would love that as well. But yeah, man, Keith Chartis, the Bystander. But the interesting thing here is that he might be the character that a lot of people are similar to in real life, right? Or at least the most similar to out of this collection of characters. His shortcomings, his frustrations, not being able to make things happen no matter how badly he wanted to, right? And regrets. I feel like all these things are, things that people in real life can relate to. It's quite a relatable character, actually. I feel like a lot of us have probably been in his shoes in our lives at some point. But going back to Keith, impressing Carla or being noticed by Carla, it was something he was, actively working towards, right? He definitely, clearly had an interest in her. But then when he did become the commander, it didn't mean much anymore, right? Because he couldn't get Carla. And it was depicted in this super sad scene, as he's becoming the commander, but he's kind of dead inside, and that transitions into him standing in the background as Grisha and Carla get hitched. Oh, that was just so sad, man. And they also finally showed me this plague they mentioned all the way back in episode 1 of the series. Hannes mentioned it, and he said that Grisha was the one to save everyone from it. And I think even before Grisha did that, I think he was probably established and settled in the community at this point, right? More on that later. I've got a whole section just for Grisha Jaeger. More on that later. But, of course, saving everyone from a plague probably, raised his status even more, and, probably even brought him even more respect within that community, right? And I think maybe there was a bit of Nightingale effect in play as well, because both him and Carla kind of, fell for each other. So, jumping to that scene of Keith returning from yet another failed mission and coming across Carla and baby Eren, who was cute as hell. But, his outburst, it was harsh. It was harsh and it was out of line. Some of the things he said to Carla were definitely out of line. But I understand his pain. I understood his pain in that moment and the frustrations of it all. He kind of reached a breaking point, and all that emotion just leaked out of him, right? He snapped. And in that moment, he didn't even realize that Carla said that because she does care for him. She doesn't want to see him die like this. And in that sense, he's one of the lucky ones, because he retired as the commander and he's still alive, right? And so in that outburst, he had to go at people who lived low-key lives, right? Lacking imagination and lacking ambition, right? And he said something similar to Grisha in that pub, right? He's talking about he can't stand people who are just happy, with the situation, right? They're happy as long as they have the basics, and that's all they really need, right? And that kind of took me back to my discussion from season 2. I believe it was called The Hunters, season 2, episode 8, I think, in that episode, I, talked about how there seems to be two types of people within the walls, right? There's the group, and, this group is probably the majority. It's the people who are okay with the lives they have at the moment. As long as they're safe and have some of the basics, it's good enough, right? It's good enough. And Hannes was one of those people, right? He actually wanted those times back, right? And then the other side, and of course it's a minority, of course, but these are the people who are not happy, or not, they're not going to accept the situation as it is, and they're much more proactive in terms of changing it, right, and taking it into their own hands and having that ambition and that fire, right? I believe I called it a generational gap back then. But yeah, choosing to set ablaze your life, which may or may not burn to ashes outside the walls. Poignant, man, poignant stuff. But yeah, in terms of Keith, he so badly wanted to be that type of person, right? And he tried, but he just couldn't make it happen. And he did realize that, yeah, there are special people out there, right? Unfortunately, I'm just not one of them. All right, so let's talk about it. Grisha Jaeger. Oh my God. I've been dying to know more about him. He's been such an elusive figure of this story. And they finally gave me some much needed backstory. Now that being said, I do think this is just scratching the surface, because, even after this episode, I have so many more questions about him, right? But I can't get greedy. They did give me some substantial information in this episode, so let's stick to that. Now then, going back to my episode 6 discussion, I theorized that Grisha might actually already know who this warrior crew is. I theorized that the shifter in the Beast Titan might actually be his brother, right? And then if that is the case, they got separated at some point. Now, staying on that, train of thought, is it possible that Grisha Jaeger was the first of the warrior crew, right? The first one sent out there on a mission to infiltrate, perhaps, to become the first sleeper agent, right? I remember I used to talk about a potential sleeper agent back in season 1, right? The possibility of that was just so exciting to me. It just made so much sense, to have a sleeper agent, infiltrate, and spend years in there and learn and, just take in everything they can. It just made a lot of sense. That possibility made a lot of sense to me, and it's an exciting possibility, right? So is it possible that he was a sleeper agent, right, sent to infiltrate? And as I said during the episode, he had a lot of questions for Keith, right? He wanted to learn about everything, right? Perhaps as part of his mission, right? And at one point he even said, all about you people, right? So going back to him potentially being, the first of the warrior crew to show up, and being on this mission, to infiltrate, to be a sleeper agent and learn as much as he can. If that was the case, he failed that mission, right? Or he gave up on that mission and he defected. And, he fell in love and settled down. And, the walls became his new home. That's one possibility, right? What if he was sent in for the exact same reason Rainer, Bertolt, Annie, and the late Marcel were sent in for? What if he was sent in to, locate the coordinate, retrieve it, and then bring it back, right? Let's take it a step further. What if there's a different faction who wanted to send in their own guy, and Grisha being that guy, and they wanted to beat the warrior crew to, retrieving the coordinate? That could be an exciting potential or possibility. And say if that was the mission, he kind of accomplished it, right? part of it at least. He retrieved the coordinate, but then he gave it to his son. Another possibility is that it might not have been, something so grand as being a sleeper agent and infiltrating, right? He might have just escaped. That's a possibility. It could be similar to Ymir's situation. Maybe he was also a prisoner or a captive, and he was punished in the same manner, right? Injected and tossed off the wall, and doomed to this prison of flesh for eternity, right? If that was the case, he would also have to run into a Titan shifter, right? Much like Ymir did. That is probably the least likeliest, right? Of all the possibilities I've listed. Because the chances of him running into a Titan shifter are minuscule, right? Absolutely minuscule. And it's not like he was out there running around in his human form, because he'd be long dead, right? But he did say he doesn't remember anything, or he doesn't have any memories at all, right? The show has established that, there are side effects to becoming a Titan shifter, right? And one of the major side effects is memory loss, right? Ymir didn't remember, Eren didn't remember. Is it possible the same thing is going on here right now? Is it possible that he just recently became a Titan shifter? Hence the memory loss and, no recollection of his past, right? Other than his name and occupation, right? And like I said earlier, it's not like he was out there running around in his human form. He is a Titan shifter. And like I said, he remembered that he's a doctor. I think that's important. That's a thing to note here, because if he was a doctor, that means he was established in his community, right? He was practicing. So as I was saying a few episodes ago, Grisha Jaeger is, definitely the most interesting character to learn more about, or the most fascinating, right? Because a lot of the mysteries of the show seem to be attached to him, right? Or a lot of the current mysteries. I have questions. I still have so many questions. I think the next step is getting to know how he ended up at the walls, right? Again, I do feel like this is just scratching the surface, and I'm really excited to learn more about him. I'm not sure how long it's gonna be before I get more about Grisha, but again, one of the most interesting and fascinating characters of the show. That was thoroughly satisfying, man. So let's get into some of the stuff from earlier on in the episode. Finally, a much needed time skip, or a much needed break for the characters, right? They've had a breathless, crazy few months, right? So they definitely deserve it, right? People noticed a distinct difference in them, just after a few months. That one guy who was teasing Jean, he noticed a visible change in their faces and their demeanor, right? They came out the other side battle-hardened, right? Even Keith Shardis noticed, something different. He said he barely recognized them. And, Historia, she wasn't all talk. She made it happen, orphans and the needy from the underground, the ones that are most disenfranchised and feel unneeded the most. She helped them out, right? And it was great to see that Levi was by her side, and he helped in making that happen, for the needy from the underground. I find it interesting that Eren reiterated Historia's stance, or her pledge. If they need help, she'll come to their rescue, kind of like no questions asked, right? I just felt the tone of that particular scene felt important, or Eren's tone felt important. So it'll be interesting to see if she might be sidetracked for the remainder of the story, or if she does have another role to play in this story, right? Because let's not forget, she does have royal blood, so maybe that could potentially come back into play. Let's see. But again, that being said, I think her arc has reached its natural conclusion, right? And you know, of course, the queen's not going to be going out on you know, scouting missions again, right? You know, with the scouts, she has other responsibilities now. You know, I noticed that Eren's demeanor in this episode was quite solemn, right? Historia asked him about Reiner and Bertolt and what he would do if they ran into him again, or if he ran into them or faced them again. His reply, I have no choice but to kill them. But you know, the thing here is the tone and the demeanor. It's totally different from season 2 Eren, right? He was almost reluctant, right? And season 2 Eren was like full of rage and hatred. He despised them, right? His hate for them was at like an all-time high. So, you know, it's interesting to see his demeanor now as he talks about them. And also, you know, later on in the episode, he has the same type of tone, solemn tone, as he's thinking about the Titans, right? And the hellish nightmare, the person within those Titans, or a person within the Titan might be going through, right? So his perception has changed a bit after having more context, right? He seems to have cooled down that idea of destroy all Titans, right? Or at least he's looking at it through a different lens now, right? Much more empathy, perhaps. And, you know, as he's thinking of, you know, the Titans and, you know, the people inside being in this endless nightmare, you know, he's thinking of Ymir, and he's also, you know, thinking of the Smiling Titan. So I thought that was interesting that, you know, once again, they've shown the Smiling Titan, or he's thinking of the Smiling Titan as well. But, you know, I just remembered something. Remember in season 1, how he used to rage out, right? And he almost used to go into this, not almost, he used to go into this crazy trance almost, right? In his Titan form. And he used to say shit like, you know, I'll rip you apart. I'll kill all of you. I'll destroy the entire world. He used to say those kind of things, right? It happened in both his fights against Annie, right? He goes into that rage mode, that, you know, that trance. And it happened once in that cannonball incident, around the time of that cannonball incident. I still remember he's like I'll kill you all, and then, you know, he doesn't realize he's not in his Titan form anymore, and like an Armin's just standing there, and he's like, what? But yeah, man, you know, I think that's about it for this episode. But, you know, circling back to the ending of the episode, how about that final scene, man? Absolutely beautiful, man. You know, had me covered in goosebumps, right? As that, you know, the ending score kicks in during Carla's beautiful words for her son. You know, he's already special because he's born in this world, right? And, you know, that was such a cool callback to season 1. Eren said that same thing, right? He said it in a different circumstance, right? Under a different circumstance. But it was around the time he's like stuck in that limbo state, and Armin helps him kind of break out of it. But yeah, you know, it was a cool callback, you know, to have that come back in. And, you know, that the shot of him looking up at the sky, I just, you know, that's such a beautiful moment. And, you know, there's a hint of a smile, I think, as he rides off. But yeah, I think that's all I really need to talk about this episode. And if you enjoyed that, please hit the like button, leave your comments, let me know what you guys thought. All right, so thanks for checking that out. Take it easy. I'll see you soon.